Okay, so let's start out here with a little bit of speculation, right? I think it's been a little bit of a slower week for news as I'm recording this episode, because I can always splice in things here and there if breaking news comes out as I'm editing or something like that. But as of the recording of this episode, it's been a little bit of a slower week. However, there's something that's been on my mind recently, and you'll kind of notice that last week was a little bit there were a few topics that have something in particular in common, and that is Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man obviously is one of the most popular characters ever. I'm not just talking about comic books, I'm not just talking about superheroes, I'm talking about literally one of the most popular fictional characters to ever exist. And, I think that's been reflected in the MCU, which you have your 3 Spider-Man films, Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home, have grossed about, I think maybe something like $3.5 billion, or almost $4 billion, right? It's crazy how much money those 3 films have made. And it's just the popularity of the character. You have the Beyond the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse films, and even the Venom films, which are not, necessarily Spider-Man films, but they're adjacent to the Spider-Man universe. Now, obviously, Madam Web and Morbius aside, but, Venom has as much closer ties to Spider-Man. So there have been a lot of rumors lately, and we're going to be talking about another rumor later on in the episode about the Scarlet Witch. But right now, I just wanted to talk about Spider-Man. So we have confirmation, right? Kevin Feige has not gotten up on a stage and said, "This is Spider-Man, no multiverse, no home." I don't know what it's going to be called. But, Spider-Man 4, and it's coming out in December 2025 is what I'm predicting. Kevin Feige has not come out and said anything like that. However, it's basically been confirmed. We talked about this in the last week's podcast episode. We talked about Spider-Man 4 being directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, and what that might mean for the MCU moving forward. There have been a lot of reports recently as well from scoopers and from some people who have seem like they have some reliability, but also, again, a lot of people who seem to also get some things wrong sometimes. So we're just taking those with a grain of salt. But there have been a lot of rumors lately about Spider-Man 4. Some saying that Spider-Man 4 was supposed to be a multiverse film, and then it got Marvel Studios was pushing it to be a street level film, and Sony wants it to be a multiverse film. Another interesting rumor lately that says that Knull, who appeared briefly, Knull is the symbiote god who appeared in the Venom: The Last Dance trailer, and will probably be playing some kind of significant role in that film. There are some rumors that says Knull will be the villain of Spider-Man 4. I find that a little bit hard to believe, just because I think that the extent to which Marvel Studios proper wants to cross over the Sony universe into the MCU is questionable, because I just think aside from Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, there has not been a lot of success with that side of the Sony universe. However, it has been a rumor going around. So I thought we'd just take a second here, just as we introduce the podcast, to just talk about what we think Spider-Man 4 could and should be. Now, there are a lot of factors going into this, so I'm just going to lay the scene. I'm going to set the scene here, and then I'll talk about what I personally would hope a Spider-Man 4 could and should be. And again, this is just my own personal thought that has, if you had asked me after Spider-Man Far From Home, what do you think the third iteration of this Tom Holland Spider-Man should be? There's no way I would have said anything close to, they should bring back Green Goblin, and how about Sandman and Electro and Doc Ock, and let's just throw in Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. No way. So when I say should, I mean it in jest. I mean it facetiously to say, sure. This is what I think based on what I know I think they should be doing, but I have no right to say any of that. And if they come up with a great story that is completely different, that's awesome. I'm so excited for that. But let's set the scene here. So Spider-Man 4, I think at the earliest will come out in fall 2025. I think late fall, probably Christmas time 2025. If not, maybe very early 2026. However, here's why I'm going to tell you that's pretty unlikely. So if you know anything about the movie release calendar, you'll know that there are hot spots, right? There are certain months of the year where people, movie studios think that it's better to put out movies. Now, those things have been shifting around, right? And I think more and more we're seeing that pretty much every single month of the year you can put out a movie and have it be, somewhat successful at the very least. But I think there are some months that movie studios target as more successful than others. For example, May has pretty much become the official kickoff to the summer blockbuster season. That used to be the beginning of June. It slowly moved up to May. I don't see it creeping into April, although I know Infinity War and Endgame released at the very end of April. I don't see that being a major trend. I think those are just unique situations. But regardless, I think the very first weekend of May is very coveted because it's sort of the beginning of summer season. I think also Memorial Day is a big thing as well. And then obviously you have your summer season because, kids are out of school and people are relaxing a little bit more and maybe willing to go to the movies a little bit more. So summer is a big deal. And then you have your, your Christmas and Thanksgiving season. So those are some hot spots. Traditionally, January and February have not been known to be the hottest of months, not even weather-wise, just in terms of the box office, for movies. And even March, Marvel has released films in the past. They released Captain Marvel and it made $1 billion. So it's not like they can't release films in March and not have success. However, Spider-Man is a character that you absolutely want to maximize how much you can make. By putting it in the Christmas season for No Way Home, I believe that made a very tangible difference with how many people were able to see Spider-Man No Way Home. It made almost $2 billion. And I'm not saying that if you put it out in January, that it would have, would not have made would have made something like $300 million. No, nothing like that. I'm just saying that I think putting it out in January, like in the middle of January versus the Christmas season, would have been the difference. I genuinely think maybe between a couple $100 million. And that's just, to us, right? Us movie fans, when we're, looking at all these numbers, a couple $100 million, oh, whatever, Marvel goes from 1.7 billion to 1.9 billion, doesn't matter. But to them, that is $200 million worth of profit. And I'm just throwing out numbers here. I'm not trying to suggest anything. I'm just throwing out numbers for the sake of, for the sake of this exercise. So I think if they're going to start filming in early 2025, which is the rumor, which is the report, then the absolute earliest that I think a Spider-Man film could come out is probably Thanksgiving or Christmas. So let's just say Christmas because, keep it consistent with Spider-Man No Way Home. Because I just don't see it coming out anytime before that prime, maybe May release date of 2026, if it's not Christmas 2025. Now, the problem with that, the quote-unquote problem with that, is that May 2026 has a little movie coming out called Avengers Doomsday, right? And this is important because Spider-Man 4, we think, we could be wrong, but we think will, continue the MCU tradition of generally having these films take place in the same timeline, which means that, each film in each show generally comes one after the other. We have some exceptions for sure, like Ant-Man and the Wasp is an exception, right? And so, yeah, for sure, if Spider-Man 4 releases July 2026 and it takes place right before Doomsday, sure, maybe. I think it's a little weird. Like, it's just a little strange if that happens. No pun intended, Doctor Strange. But, they could do that for sure. But I'm operating under the assumption that they have their story, and their story lines up with Doomsday in such a way that it's either taking place before or after. Now, the heavy rumor, this has not been confirmed at all, but the heavy rumor is that every film that takes place after Doomsday and before Secret Wars will be taking place in Battleworld or some version of Battleworld, because I think the big assumption, there have been some reports out there that have said Battleworld will be formed at the end of at the end of Doomsday. And so the films that will be taking place in between Doomsday and Secret Wars, and that could be a Doctor Strange 3, that makes more sense in terms of between Doomsday and Secret Wars. But who knows, right? Who knows what films come out between that? Maybe even Shang-Chi 2 could take place in there. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Probably not. But Spider-Man 4. It either, depending on when it releases, right, it's going to take place either between Secret Wars and Doomsday or before Doomsday, is my opinion. I just don't see them waiting. I think they can't possibly release this after Secret Wars. So those are really the two options that we have going for us here. Now, what's interesting about that, like I alluded to before, is that this drastically changes what the story could be, right? Because depending on what you have, you either have a Spider-Man in New York, fighting some kind of, it could be anything. You could have anything. Spider-Man doesn't have to be in New York, but he's in some kind of normal Earth situation. Or you have Spider-Man in some version of Battleworld doing something crazy, right? So who knows? Who knows? But I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, like I mentioned earlier in this segment, is that there have been rumors about they wanted to go multiversal. Like Marvel Studios did not want it to go multiversal. They wanted it to be more street level, while Sony wanted it to be more multiversal because of the success of No Way Home. So that's sort of the scene. That's where we are. Also, just a reminder, at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, we had Peter Parker in New York. He had his own costume, and we're setting up a lot of different things in the street levels of the MCU. So Here is what I'm thinking about Spider-Man 4. First of all, if I had to choose between having it take place between Doomsday and Secret Wars and Battleworld or before Doomsday, it's no question. And I think a lot of you would agree with me here as well. I think it makes too much sense just to keep Spider-Man as Spider-Man and then have him go on the Avengers level expeditions in space and in the multiverse in the Avengers films. But in the Spider-Man film proper, I think even though No Way Home was a crazy multiverse film, he was still in New York. It was still Statue of Liberty, right? It's still Spider-Man. And I think Spider-Man 4, especially now that he's more grounded and he's more of a solo hero, it should definitely be in New York, and I think it should be in the normal Earth situation. Now, whether or not they do a multiverse film or they do a grounded street level film, if I had my preference, it would be a very much street level film. That doesn't necessarily mean it's kind of Punisher style or, Penguin level grounded, which obviously we'll be talking about the Penguin in a little bit, but it doesn't have to be that dark or gritty or mafia-esque or whatever. But I'm saying grounded as in, let's keep the stakes personal. Let's keep the stakes less multiversal, which I think was able to keep the stakes still personal to Peter. But I think that what's really appealing about this character now is that we can go in a different direction that we haven't seen with Tom Holland before. And look, does that necessarily mean a Daredevil team up? Does that mean Daredevil and Spider-Man against Kingpin? I may say something unpopular here. I don't think it has to, right? I think it could, and it would be very cool. But I think also there is something so appealing about just seeing Tom Holland and just seeing Spider-Man be Spider-Man in this crazy world that he has to navigate, because it's enough for him just to be Spider-Man. I mean, they made so many films about it with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield about just him being Peter Parker and him being Spider-Man, because that should be more than enough to carry a film. So in the end, right, I think that we're faced with a lot of potential options, and I'm very curious to see what Spider-Man 4 ends up being. But for me personally, I think I'm hoping for a more grounded solo adventure before he inevitably goes back and has to come face to face with the person, or with the face at least, of the person that he cared about the most in the Infinity Saga, and that's Tony Stark, aka now Victor Von Doom. So I think that'll be really interesting, and we'll see where we go from there. But I ask you guys, what do you think about Spider-Man 4, and what do you think the style of the film should be? Will it be more grounded, more multiverse? Will it take place in Battleworld? Would you prefer that? Let me know in the comments down below.